Ratchet & Clank has been around for quite a while now. The first game came out in 2002, 19 years ago, and since then, each generation of PlayStation hardware has seen its fair share of Ratchet & Clank games. Rift Apart is the first one to grace the PS5, and it couldn't have come at a better time considering that we really don't have that many options for PS5 games at the moment. I am a fan of the Ratchet & Clank series, having played around half of all the games. On a surface level, the Ratchet & Clank series doesn't really seem like my thing. I've never been too big on platformers, but the gunplay and humor were the secret sauce to the formula that kept me interested. Unfortunately, however, even the best of formulas can get stale as time goes on, and Insomniac knows this, as indicated by their brief forays into other kinds of Ratchet games like a 4-player co-op or tower defense game with All for One and Full Frontal Assault respectively. Rift Apart is not a different kind of Ratchet & Clank game with all the pros and cons that comes with that. I played Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart on the PS5 for one playthrough on normal difficulty. This video will be spoiler free. In terms of the visuals, Rift Apart shows us what the next generation of gaming is truly going to look like. The amount of detail and just pure graphical fidelity and prowess on display every single frame of this game is astonishing. Insomniac have always been one of the underdogs of the game industry in my opinion, similar to Sucker Punch. Always making great games but not really getting the recognition they deserved. But just like what happened to Sucker Punch when Ghost of Tsushima was released, Insomniac finally got their time in the limelight when Spider-Man came out. And since then, people have been paying more attention to what the studio can do. And goddamn are they ready to show people what they can do. Each planet you visit is distinct and unique from each other, with a visual presentation that is just too beautiful to ignore. I often feel like I struggle to convey my thoughts on a game's presentation in my reviews because, well, how many ways can I really come up with to say that a game looks good or bad in every video? But trust me when I say that Rift Apart might be the best looking game I've ever played from a pure graphical perspective. Not my favorite looking game, but it is gorgeous. The game has 3 different graphics modes: Performance, which nixes the ray tracing in favor of running at 60 frames per second, Fidelity, which limits the game to 30 frames per second but enables ray tracing and 4K, and Performance Ray Tracing, which allows ray tracing at 60 FPS with a lower resolution and some other stuff. Personally, I will almost always pick Performance over Presentation and stuck with Performance mode for my whole playthrough. I did switch it to Fidelity mode after I finished the game and went around to a bunch of planets to check out the ray tracing. And while you can definitely notice it, I think the game still looks really damn good without it. It's nowhere near as drastic of a difference as I thought it would be. The character and enemy designs are pretty great, with an almost Pixar-like quality to them and animations that are exaggerated and comical to just the right degree. The visuals are colorful and varied, and yeah man, this genuinely does look like a Pixar movie at times. There is some pop-in and a couple spots in the environment missing textures, and I encountered one glitch where Mrs. Zircon, the weapon vendor in the game, thought I was in combat when I definitely wasn't and wouldn't let me access the store. But overall, the game ran smooth as butter. The soundtrack is pretty good. It's much more orchestral than some of the earlier games in the franchise, but there are still shades of the more electronic early 2000s sound of those games. Not much, but it's still there. And there are some bangers in here, but I don't think I'm going to be coming back to listen to this game's music on my own time or anything like that. The game begins with Ratchet & Clank being thrown a celebratory parade to thank them for all their heroics over the years and a pretty cool homage to the series past. Clank reveals to Ratchet that he has been working on a Dimensionator, which is a device that can allow the user to travel through different dimensions. Clank wants Ratchet to use the Dimensionator to search for the rest of the Lombaxes. Of course, things don't go quite as planned as Dr. Nefarious shows up at the parade and steals the Dimensionator. In the ensuing scuffle, the Dimensionator is damaged and causes dimensional rifts to start appearing all across the multiverse, I guess, which will lead to the eventual destruction of all of reality. Ratchet and Clank are separated and end up in different dimensions, and each encounter a new respective companion, Kit for Ratchet and Rivet for Clank. From there, each pair sets out to reunite with each other and put an end to the dimensional rifts. I'm not gonna lie, when I first saw Rivet in the trailers for Rift Apart, I groaned as I thought that she was just gonna be a female version of Ratchet and the game would feel gimmicky and annoying. I'm glad to say that I was wrong. Rivet isn't just the female version of Ratchet, she is her own character and I actually liked her a lot. And she's also voiced by Jennifer Hale, aka FemShep, which really surprised me because those two characters don't sound anything alike. One thing I didn't really like about the story, however, is how kiddie it felt. Older Ratchet and Clank games felt like they had stories for all ages, stories that a kid could enjoy while also having a little something for older audiences as well. I mean, the first game is literally a satire and parody of consumerist and capitalist culture. Granted, those early games definitely feel a bit dated because they leaned a little bit too hard into late 90s, early 2000s edgy sensibilities. You know, like, totally radical, dude, wow! You know, that kind of thing. But Rift Apart just has very little personality in its characters and story. Characters are always talking about the power of friendship and how great being friends is, and it's just really basic and safe stuff for kids. Don't get me wrong, it's not a bad story per se, and there's nothing wrong about stories aimed at kids, but I can't help but be a little bit disappointed in the direction Insomniac has taken these characters. Instead of adding more depth and complexity to the story and characters, they've taken some away. I have a friend who's also a fan of the series, and he's actually played every game in the franchise, and he also shares the same sentiment on the story and characters. I do think though that this is a great game for kids. I just don't think that you'll get much out of the story if you're older than the age of 12. This is the same classic Ratchet & Clank gameplay that we've had for the last 19 years, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. The good part is that it's pretty damn good gameplay. Insomniac has always been great at coming up with some really unique and fun guns in their games, like the Resistance series and especially Ratchet & Clank, and Rift Apart is no exception. Each weapon has its own upgrade path, and you can buy upgrades with Raritanium, which can be found throughout each level or planet you explore. There are special nodes in the middle of each upgrade branch that can be unlocked to give you extra stats after you've unlocked each node around the bundle. Your weapons also level up the more you use them, making more upgrades available for purchase. And Ratchet and Rivet can also level up as well, increasing their max health. The game feels super responsive and tight to play, whether you're sprinting, dashing, or hoverbooting around a battlefield. Grinding sections also make a return, though these are very infrequent and a lot easier than past games. The combat is really solid and fun, but it has one major issue that really made the game drag for the last few hours. It's very repetitive. There are a lot of different looking enemies in the game, but there are only a handful of enemy types, and you will be fighting the same kinds of enemies over and over and over. The game also recycles boss fights or mini boss fights over and over and over. I'm pretty sure I fought this big robot boy like 10 times throughout the game, and I've definitely fought the skeleton guy at least 7 times. Another contributing factor to combat feeling repetitive is that you never really need to change your tactics. Every weapon works against every enemy, so you're never forced to change your strategy. The only enemy that ever made me change my weapons during combat were the shielded enemy, but that's literally it. Otherwise, I would just use a gun until it ran out of ammo before I switched to the next one. Ratchet and Rivet also play exactly the same. Everything Ratchet can do, Rivet can as well. And they both have the same arsenals. If you've unlocked something while playing as Rivet, Ratchet will also just magically have that same weapon. So there isn't anything interesting done with the two different playable characters gameplay-wise. The screen also becomes super noisy and cluttered during combat, to the point where it can genuinely be hard to see what the hell's going on with all the particle effects and projectiles flying everywhere. As this is a Ratchet and Clank game, there are a lot of collectibles to find littered throughout each area of the game. You can find gold bolts, which can unlock things like different skins, game filters, a big head mode, and other things. Then you have spy bots that give a little bit of background about each location you visit, as well as lorbs, which reveal some of the history of the Lombaxes. You can also find various pieces of armor like boots, helmets, and chest pieces that belong to a set, and each set gives you specific boosts like more XP gained from killing enemies or increasing melee damage. The cool thing is that once you've unlocked the full set, you don't have to wear that set if you don't want to, because you still get the buffs even if you don't have the set equipped. These armor pieces can be found in dimensional rifts, which are short platforming challenges scattered around each level. Clank has his own puzzle sections to complete at various points in the game, similar to a crack in time. You'll be trying to get these Pikmin clanks from one end of the level to the other with these special orbs that have different effects, like a heavy orb that can weigh down platforms, or these speed orbs which can make the clanks go faster. These puzzles aren't particularly hard, but there were a couple that had me scratching my head for a little while. Glitch is a little robot that Ratchet acquires during the story, and she gets her own shoot-'em-up levels at multiple points in the game. It's not too deep, but it's a nice break from the typical combat in the rest of the game. Rift Apart is a showcase for what the PS5 can do. These are next-gen visuals. But the rest of the game feels decidedly old-school Ratchet & Clank for better or worse. The combat is solid and fun, but the game can't keep it feeling fresh all the way to the end of the game, and the story is squarely aimed at kids, which isn't in and of itself a negative thing, but it's hard not to feel disappointed that there isn't more to it than that. All in all, Rift Apart is a game worth playing if you're a fan of the series, or just looking for a game to play on your PS5 that actually feels like it showcases what the console has to offer. And if you have kids, I'm sure they'd love this game too. But personally, this is not one of my favorite Ratchet & Clank games, despite it being overall a pretty solid game. I'm going to give Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart a 7.5 out of 10. It's been a while since my last review, and I apologize for the wait. There's been a lot going on. I moved to a new place, I started a new job, and I had to deal with some health-related things. But now I'm back and ready to go. The next review will be for Alan Wake. If you liked this video, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, and commenting your thoughts on the game. Thanks for watching.